Every company's got skeletons in the closet. But Enron, they had a graveyard. You might think the Enron scandal was a one-off, an unfortunate blip on the corporate radar. But let me ask you, how many times have you been sold the same lie, wrapped in a shinier package? In the corporate world, there's no such thing as transparency, not when profits are on the line. Enron didn't just bend the rules, they rewrote the playbook. They shook hands with investors, all while hiding the truth in a maze of accounting tricks no one could unravel. Innovation, that's what they called it. But behind the facade of booming stocks and glowing headlines, Enron was built on nothing but smoke. In Houston, Enron wasn't playing the game. They owned the table. The world loved them for it until it didn't. The cost of building empires on illusions is always paid, one way or another. But here's the kicker. Enron wasn't an anomaly. What they did back then, companies today are still doing. You see, the game hasn't changed, it's just gotten better at hiding. And you've been watching the same show, only with a different cast. What if I told you the Enron playbook is alive and well? Behind every record-breaking stock, there's a truth waiting to be uncovered. And if you think Enron's collapse was the end of this story, you're about to get a rude awakening. What's happening now, it's worse. I've seen the cracks in the system long before they start to show. Enron? They were the first domino. But believe me, they weren't the last. This isn't just about them. It's about all the others still out there, playing the same game. You might think this is just another story from the past, but you're wrong. If you don't pay attention, you'll be the one footing the bill when it all comes crashing down again. In business, power doesn't come to those who play by the rules. It comes to those who write the rules. Enron didn't just climb the mountain, they owned it. Energy, trading, broadband, there wasn't a market they didn't try to dominate. But for all their ambition, there was one thing they couldn't outrun: the truth. Enron, once hailed as the darling of Wall Street, wasn't just another company. Founded by Kenneth Lay in 1985, it transformed from a simple energy supplier to an empire, trading in everything from natural gas to electricity. But Enron didn't thrive on innovation alone. No, their real secret? Accounting tricks that would make even the most seasoned auditor scratch their head. You see, when you hide your debt in special purpose entities, offshore partnerships designed to keep liabilities off your books, no one sees the storm brewing. Investors see profit, and that's all they need. Enron played the game better than anyone, using mark-to-market accounting to report profits on deals they hadn't even completed yet. Smoke and mirrors, illusions dressed up as success. By 2000, Enron stock hit an all-time high of $90.75, and the company was being lauded as one of the most innovative corporations in America. The market adored them, praising their forward-thinking strategies in energy trading and even their plans to dominate the emerging broadband market. But behind the curtain, CFO Andrew Fastow was orchestrating one of the largest financial deceptions in corporate history. Special purpose entities like LJM1 and LJM2 allowed Enron to hide billions in debt while inflating earnings, all with the blessing of their auditors, Arthur Andersen. In Houston, they had a saying, "You don't ask where the money's coming from as long as it's pouring in." And boy, was it pouring in. But here's the thing, they weren't making profits. They were moving money around, playing a game of financial musical chairs and hoping no one would notice when the music stopped. But every illusion has an expiration date. Enron's troubles became too big to hide by late 2001. The cracks that had been ignored by investors, regulators, and even the media finally began to show when CEO Jeffrey Skilling suddenly resigned in August 2001, citing personal reasons. The stock market started to ask questions. By the time whistleblower Sharon Watkins raised concerns internally, it was already too late. The company's stock, once the pride of Wall Street, plummeted to less than $1 by December, and Enron filed for bankruptcy. Good things happen to good people, they say. But Enron, they weren't good. They were clever. And in the corporate world, being clever means knowing how to make others believe the lie long enough to cash out. But there's always a bill to pay when the illusion fades. And for Enron, it was one hell of a price. I've watched this happen before. The bigger the promises, the harder the fall. Enron wasn't a company, it was a time bomb, ticking away behind layers of false profits and hollow numbers. The warning signs were there for anyone who bothered to look. But here's the truth, no one wanted to look. So, how did it all unravel? It wasn't the media. It wasn't the SEC. It was something more inevitable, something that had been lurking beneath the surface the entire time. And when it surfaced, there was no stopping the collapse. No empire crumbles overnight. The cracks start small, easy to ignore, easy to cover up. But when the foundation is built on deception, even the smallest crack can bring down the whole structure. Enron, didn't implode in a single moment. It was a slow burn, a fuse lit by ambition, greed, and a belief that no one would ever dare to look behind the curtain. By 2001, Enron's tangled web of deception was starting to unravel. Their famed mark-to-market accounting, which allowed them to book future profits as if they were current, was nothing more than a smokescreen. Deals that hadn't even come close to completion were recorded as wins, losses. They were swept into special purpose entities, SPEs, like LJM1 and LJM2, where CFO Andrew Fastow kept billions in debt, hidden from the company's financial statements. It was all too perfect, too clever. They thought no one would ask the right questions. Why would they? The stock was soaring, everyone was getting rich. When the money's coming your way, you don't stop to ask how the sausage gets made. But in August 2001, the first domino fell. Jeffrey Skilling, the man who had been the architect of Enron's aggressive accounting strategies, resigned suddenly, leaving the public and the market scrambling for answers. His departure was seen as the first sign of trouble, but by then, the cracks were already deep. Sharon Watkins, a senior executive, sent an internal memo warning CEO Kenneth Lay that Enron was headed for a collapse, describing the company as a house of cards, ready to fall. You can hide the truth for a while, bury it under layers of paperwork and accounting tricks, but eventually someone will come looking, and when they find it, the whole thing falls apart. By October 2001, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, launched an investigation. The markets were watching. Enron's stock, once a titan at $90 per share, began its free fall. The world had finally caught on. Arthur Andersen, the company's trusted auditor, was implicated in the scandal for helping to obscure the truth, shredding thousands of documents to cover up their complicity. But the damage was already done. The higher they soared, the harder they fell. Enron didn't just lose money, they lost everything. Stock value, jobs, reputations, and in the end, they lost what little trust the public had left in corporate America. In December 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy, the largest in US history at the time. Thousands of employees lost their jobs and pensions. Investors were left with nothing. The company's once bright future was reduced to ash, and its top executives were left to face the consequences. Kenneth Lay, Andrew Fastow, and Jeffrey Skilling became the faces of corporate greed, each facing criminal charges. Arthur Andersen, one of the world's largest accounting firms, was destroyed, collapsing under the weight of their involvement. I've seen these kinds of games before, seen the rise, the applause, the adoration. But what most people never see is what happens behind closed doors. The truth, as always, is ugly. Enron didn't just collapse. They were dismantled, piece by piece, by their own arrogance. The fuse had been lit long before anyone noticed. But Enron's collapse wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. A corporate disaster that would leave behind a trail of new regulations and a warning. When you fly too close to the sun, you burn. So, what did the world learn? Did the system change? Or did we just find new ways to play the same game? When a kingdom falls, the shockwaves ripple far beyond its borders. Enron wasn't just a collapse. It was a corporate earthquake. Thousands of jobs lost. Billions of dollars vanished. Reputations shattered. But the real legacy of Enron, the rules of the game changed, or so they want you to believe. Enron's collapse wasn't just a corporate failure. It was a wake-up call that reverberated through the halls of power. The financial system had allowed this empire of deceit to flourish, and now everyone was scrambling to clean up the mess. Sarbanes-Oxley was the immediate band-aid, passed in 2002, designed to ensure that a disaster like this would never happen again. But legislation doesn't change the game, it just changes the way it's played. Sarbanes-Oxley, it sounds like progress. It sounds like accountability. But the truth? It's just more red tape. Sure, CEOs and CFOs now have to sign off on financial statements, auditors can't play both sides, and there's more oversight. But, as long as there are profits to be made, there will always be someone clever enough to bend the rules. New law, same game. Thousands of Enron employees were left in financial ruin, their pensions wiped out. Kenneth Lay, Andrew Fastow, and Jeffrey Skilling were handed their indictments, the scapegoats for a system that had let them flourish in the first place. Lay, who once stood atop the corporate world, died of a heart attack in 2006, before he could be sentenced. Skilling, once hailed as a visionary, faced a lengthy prison sentence. Fastow, the architect of Enron's financial wizardry, served time too, but let's not pretend they were the only ones responsible. You think the game stopped with them? Number Enron was just the most visible. They were the ones who got caught. But the truth? Corporate America didn't stop playing. They just got better at hiding the ball. Every crisis leads to new rules, but those at the top always find ways around them. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act imposed tougher regulations on corporations, forcing public companies to disclose their financials in a more transparent way, tightening auditing procedures and placing harsher penalties on fraud. It was meant to restore trust in the system, to reassure the public that corporate greed wouldn't run unchecked. But trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it's never quite the same. I've seen this play before. They'll tell you they've fixed the system, that new laws mean accountability, that this time it's different. But in the corporate world, survival is about adaptation. Enron was a lesson, one that taught the next wave of CEOs how to cover their tracks better. Sarbanes-Oxley might have slowed the game down, but it didn't stop it, not by a long shot. So, what did we really learn from Enron? Did the rules of the game change, or did they just evolve into something more sophisticated? If you think the Enron scandal was the last time a company will deceive the world, you're in for a surprise. The game is still on, the stakes are higher, and the players smarter than ever. You think the story ends with Enron? The collapse wasn't the conclusion, it was just the opening act. The real show is what comes after. The ripple effects, the new players who learn from the mistakes, the regulators who think they've finally got a handle on things. But here's the truth. The game is always changing, and the players are always one step ahead. The Enron scandal was a monumental moment, but it was far from the last corporate disaster. Just look at the years that followed. WorldCom, Lehman Brothers, Theranos, different industries, same strategies. The game evolves, but the underlying mechanics remain the same. When you're at the top, the rules don't apply in the same way. The thing about regulation is this: it's always reactionary. They tighten the noose after the crime has already been committed. And while the watchdogs were busy writing new rules, the smartest players in the corporate world were figuring out how to dodge them. We saw it again during the 2008 financial crisis. Corporations too big to fail, banks playing fast and loose with mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps, and risky financial products that no one fully understood. What Enron did with energy, these companies did with mortgages. When the house of cards finally collapsed, it wasn't just banks that fell, it was the global economy. They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Enron wasn't an isolated event. It was a blueprint for future crises. The lesson? Greed doesn't go away. It just hides better. Regulators chase ghosts while the real monsters keep moving in the shadows. The lessons from Enron should have reshaped corporate America, but instead, we've seen new players emerge with even more complex ways of gaming the system. The world of finance is faster, more digitized, and more global than ever before. Cryptocurrencies, tech unicorns, venture capitalists, there's a whole new playground for deception. The world didn't stop spinning after Enron. If anything, it got faster. The financial crisis of 2008 proved that the lessons hadn't been learned. And while companies like Theranos show that deception still finds its way into even the most hyped businesses, the system itself remains ripe for manipulation. So, what's next? We've seen how the game is played, and we know the stakes. But the question isn't if there will be another Enron. The question is, when? The rules may change, but the game, it never ends.